Jens Nordvig joins us now, wondering where we're going, the founder and CEO
We're learning Danish
at
next.
Exante Data. Jens, I want to start with something that did not develop last year but is developing now. It's a weaker Chinese currency. Jens, what's going on there?
So when we analyze currencies, right, for the major currency pairs, it's typically about relative monetary policy. But for China, it's really about the balance of payments. So there's a number of important parts of the balance of payments in China that are really shifting dramatically. And that's finally come to the fore here last week. And we're seeing, for Chinese standards, a very, very dramatic move. I would say this move is now the most dramatic we've seen, not only since 2020. I think it's the most dramatic since 2015, when we had that revaluation that drove everything. And we can see the contagion globally is also in play. It's not just a Chinese currency issue, it's a global issue.
Is there a policy response, Jens, that you're gearing up for, you're expecting?
So the Chinese currency is heavily managed, right? So they're not going to just sit back and let it do what it wants to. But it came from a pretty strong level, right? Chinese currency has been very strong in 2020 and 2021. So we're coming into this year at a level that's pretty strong. And therefore, I think they're still pretty comfortable with allowing some degree of weakness, perhaps towards 680. And that's kind of the signals they're sending. They're not doing anything on the fixings or on the day-to-day intervention. We track intervention in very real time, right? We're not seeing anything that suggests they're just about to stop it yet.
So, Jens, I'm wondering, when you talked about the global aspect of this sell-off, I was noticing that Kit Jukes actually sees a relationship to the CNY depreciation and the euro depreciation versus the dollar. Do you make that connection as well?
Yeah, I think it's very often when dollar CNY has a big move, it drags a lot of other dollar crosses with it, including the big ones, and euro dollar is affected too. It's kind of ironic that you have the French election relief, right? And okay, is euro dollar high or lower? It's lower because actually the Chinese element of the story is dominating on the day. So I think there is that factor in play here.
Jens, off 2005 in the great Chinese appreciation, I think of Europe in a 116 level as sort of the original benchmark and maybe that guidepost that all of European finance has. Does Beijing have a 116 like level? Is it like 7 yuan? Is there a psychological point for them?
Yeah, I think we've seen it during the trade war, right? Above 7, they start to get very uncomfortable, start to do things to stop it. And that's also why I think up until 680, I think they're not going to be overly concerned. When we get above there, start to approach 7, I think it'll be a different situation. But I think, as with everything in markets this year, we have to be very careful, right? All the cyclical dynamics we're seeing are pretty much unprecedented, right? So we have to be careful about saying, okay, the ranges we've seen in the past are the ones that are going to hold in the future as well. So I think up until 7, we're certainly going to be, even within the old regime, going to be okay. But then we have to think about, okay, this is something really new, and what's going on in balance of payments in China is not something we've really seen before. So we have to be open-minded.
Jens, just a final question from us. Going forward from here, a lot of people will want a read on Chinese growth. Perhaps they'll want that, not looking at the Chinese economic data released by the government. What do you look for to get a pretty decent picture of what's happening there on the ground?
Well, so we are very, very focused on the mobility data, right? The COVID data is perhaps not, let's call it, easy to interpret, but the mobility data is pretty clean, right? And we've seen just dramatic stuff in Shanghai, and that's now spreading around the country, right? So just to give you one example, right? When we have these supply chain issues, like it puts a question mark around Chinese exports. Can they really continue to export at that space? That pace with the economy in a rolling lockdown situation? That's a big question mark and a big uncertainty for the global economy.
Jens Nordvig of Exante Data. Jens, thank you, sir. As always, just absolutely brilliant.